Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Appraisal Doctor. I am Dr. Aria A. Wilson, PhD in urban planning, certified residential appraiser. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. And if you are a regular subscriber, welcome back. If you are interested in this kind of video, stick around and let's see what's the appraisal question today. On this episode, we are going to address the question, how do you measure buildings? How do you measure properties? Typically, I speak to the examples of residential properties. Today, I'm going to speak a little bit broader. But let's just start by talking about the tool I use whenever I measure a property. In an inspection, you don't always have to measure the property. If there is an official floor plan that can be accessed, there should be no need for the appraiser to measure the property, to measure the building. Not in all cases, this is so. There might be an additional appendage to the building. There might be an outhouse that is not showing on overall aerial views, even on Google. And if that is the case, the appraiser must measure what they see on property. Now, I know in my days back in Jamaica practicing appraisals, we were not so fortunate to have many floor plans accessible. There may have plans, especially for commercial buildings, where the property owners just would not make it accessible. So we would have to measure. Now, there are two things that I want to handle, two dimensions to measuring a property that I want to speak to today, and a tip. So two dimensions of approaching this question and a tip at the end. Now, when we are talking about measuring properties, let's speak about how we measure the residential property. And let's talk about what tool we use. I'm going to show you what I use when I measure my properties. This is a running tool, and I'm going to show you exactly how this tool works. This is a close-up of the measuring window, and this measurement is in imperial measurement. So we are measuring feet and inches, okay? Now, traditionally, I used to use a tape that you pull and you hook it at the side of the building if you're the only one at the property, and you hope that it stays at the corner. You hope that the building is super square at the corner so that that hook will hold. And know those appraisers are out there. If you're an appraiser out there and you can relate to what I'm talking about, let me know in the comments, because I know I'm not alone. But having moved to the US and practicing here, there are much more tools that are to our disposals, and even more digital than this one. But this is the one that I typically use when I go on an inspection and I recognize that I need to measure. Now, this is how you use this tool. If you are at one end of the building and you're trying to measure towards the other end, you first zero the clock. Zero, make sure all zeros are there, and you start at the side of the building that you're going to measure, and you're going to pretty much just run the wheel along until you're at the end of that wall. Now, at the end of pushing the wheel along, you're going to end up with the measurement. I hope you can see this. In this case, we have a measurement of 4 feet and 2 inches. Okay? So if you're going to do another wall, you just zero the tool and start again. I hope you were able to follow just now what I did with this tool. We measured a straight wall along the floor. So we're running the wheel along and we got the measurement of 4 feet and 2 inches. Now, in calculating the total area of, say, a house that we're inspecting, we are not going to we're not going to take that 4 feet 2 inches into our calculation as is. We're going to translate that in the language of decimals. So instead of having, and it's not, guys, be careful, it's not 4.2. In order to get the decimal equivalent of 4 feet and 2 inches, we're going to divide 2 by 12 because 12 inches make a foot. Let me repeat, 12 inches make a foot. So we are at 2 divided by 12, which is 0.16. So this measurement in the decimal language would be 4.16. And there are numbers that go along to match each inch. 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch. Of course, 3 inches would be 3/12, which is a quarter of 12. So 3 inches would be 0.25 and so on. So you get the point. So you would have had the side of that wall being in decimal. You multiply by the other side to get the area and so on. Your overall building area would be in a decimal placing format. Now, let's move on to the types of measurement. So we know how to measure. Now, what types of measurements are there? What types of measurements are there and how do they relate to the type of property? Now, let's start with residential. For the residential properties, we normally take the gross building area. How do we define that? It's the area right around. We're going to calculate what we get of the area, just like in math. We're trying to figure out what the area is using measurements that are taken on the external periphery of the building footprint. So that is considered as the gross building area because it's the largest area that you can get of the property, of the building. Now, it is also called gross external area. So the gross building area is the same as the gross external area. And this is the area that is usually considered as the GBA when we are speaking jargon for in appraisal terms. When you hear someone say GBA or see GBA on paper, it simply means gross building area. It's the largest area. When you see the term gross internal area, that is when the area of the house is given from measuring on the inside. And this is usually used in the scenario where you are measuring the area of an apartment because you're not going to be accessing the external walls of the apartment from outside. Now, the gross internal area, which is used for apartments, typically means, it really just means the area of the home or the area of the apartment minus the thickness of the walls. That's basically it. So you're minusing the thickness of the walls. So if a block is 6 inches thick, then it is assumed that if you have the gross external area, you can now work back or work forward into a gross internal area. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but it's really simple. If you measure the house from inside, you have gotten the gross internal area. If you measure the house from outside, you have gotten the gross building area or the gross external area. Those are 2 types of measurements so far, and those are usually used for single family homes or for apartments in the second scenario, the gross internal area. Let's move on to commercial buildings, office spaces. In a commercial building, the office spaces are normally measured as net internal area or gross internal area. Now, we just spoke about the gross internal area, but let's talk about the net internal area. Gross internal area, we just do the measurements on the inside rather than the outside. But with the office situation, gross internal area is not used. What is used is the net internal area. What is the net internal area? It's the gross internal area less all utility spaces, less all non-rentable spaces, or the common spaces. So, for example, the utility room that keeps the heating and the air conditioning, that area, that floor area, has to be subtracted from the gross internal area. Corridors that are used by all people in the complex is considered a common area and is subtracted from the gross internal area. When you would have taken out all the common spaces or all the utility spaces, you would have now the net internal area. And this measurement is very important because this is the area on which rentals are calculated. So if somebody says to you that the rent is $18 a square foot, you are multiplying $18 by the net internal area, and you can make a gross error if you use the gross internal area of that office space to calculate the rent. So let's recap. We have gone through the tool. We spoke about the measuring wheel that I use. We spoke about the way we interpret the measurement that we get from the measuring tool in order to come by our total calculation for our analysis. Then we moved on to the different types of measurement, and we spoke about the gross external area, which is usually used for single family homes, the gross internal area, which is normally used for residential apartments or properties where you just cannot access the external walls, or the net internal area, which is typically used for commercial rental space or retail rental space. Net internal area excludes common areas and utility areas, areas that the space cannot function without a bathroom. The space cannot function without air. So those are given with the property. Those are given with the office space, given with the retail space. It has to be included. So whenever rent is being calculated, it's calculated on the net internal area. The net internal area is what is going to bring income to the property. Now, I hope I have explained this adequately. If you have any questions about measuring a property, the types of measurements, the tools with which you measure, please leave your questions in the comment section. I hope you have learned something from this episode of the Appraisal Doctor. See you in the next one. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, I hope that you will consider subscribing after seeing this video. Please give it a thumbs up, give it a like, make a comment, and let me know what you want to see next on the Appraisal Doctor. See you in the next episode.